Hi everyone, I'm Cody Schweitzer from the Chronicle Philanthropy. I'm the web editor here, and thank you for joining us today. We're talking about a new trend in design that can help charities do work better, specifically service design. And joined today with Matthew Scharpnick, co-founder of Elefint Designs, and also service designer Katrine Ofenstein. Am I saying that right, Katrine?
You are,
Great.
yes.
Great. So before we get started here, just a few housekeeping things. First, if you want to ask a question and you're watching on the on philanthropy.com, you can post a comment at the bottom of the page. If you'd like to post a question through Twitter, you can use the hashtag #RedesignGood. Again, that's #RedesignGood is the hashtag, and we'll be watching that, and we'll get to your questions at the end. So first, to introduce our guest today, Matthew approaches design by emphasizing the importance of starting with a clear strategy. Before co-founding Elefint, he worked with a number of nonprofits, managing their marketing strategy and communications. Matthew received his MBA from UC Irvine and has worked with good causes for more than a decade. He is our blogger for the Chronicle's Redesigning Good blog, and he is at Elefint on Twitter. And Katrine is very passionate about solving problems on a system scale. Before joining GE as one of their first service designers, she worked as a consultant in Denmark and the US for Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit organizations, and healthcare groups to identify business challenges and solve user problems through service innovation. Katrine has an MSc in service design from Aalborg University in Denmark, and is on the management team for the Service Design Network as the national chapter principal. So, Matt, welcome, and if you want to get us started.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Cody. Yeah, I'll just start off by saying that one of my passions and where I put a lot of my energy and work is behind helping good causes have really great design. And we started Elefint Designs because we noticed there were so many organizations out there just doing fantastic work in the world, the kind of thing that all of us want to really see succeed. But there wasn't necessarily the infrastructure or deep knowledge of design in those areas. And I think there's a lot of types of design that we could talk about, and that's what we try to do in the blog. And service design, when I first came across it, was a really exciting one. So, you know, one thing we want to do with this blog is to always be cutting edge and hopefully allow nonprofit organizations to really leapfrog even the private sector, because sometimes there's a little bit of a lag in the knowledge trickling down into the social sector. So I think service design, as we're going to probably see over the next hour or so, however long we're taking to do this, it's really suited for service design in so many ways, because nonprofits are offering services to people, and there's just a lot of great opportunity to improve on how that's done. And just for those, to kind of recap quickly the article, maybe not everybody had a chance to read it, but if you're kind of wondering if you don't totally get service design, it's pretty new to the United States, so it's taken me some time to really get my head around it as well. And Katrine did such a great job when I first talked to her about it that I think you guys will all get it by the end. But just imagine yourself standing in line at the DMV and that whole process, Department of Motor Vehicles, and what you have to go through to sort of get in line there and go through that. It's a very frustrating process, and you could imagine that someone could come in and design that in a way that would be a lot more user-friendly. And just like that, there's opportunities across the economy to make things much better from a service point of view, and I think this is an exciting area of design. So there's organizations in the United States. We highlighted a few, IDEO, Frog Design, Adaptive Path, who are doing some really cool stuff with service design, and we've got a couple projects on there that you guys can look at, and Katrine is going to get into some more here. And so we have an event that we organize every year called Design It, where we bring together designers and good causes, and we have them do a day of design for these causes. And Katrine was one of our speakers this year and gave a fantastic presentation about service design with really concrete examples, and everybody loved it. So we just thought it'd be great to do this. And so I will pass it off to her now, and then I guess at the end we can have some questions.
Thank you, Matt. Let me share my screen with you all, and then we can get started from there. One second. Screen doesn't seem to be shared.
Bear with us. This is our first try at this.
me in the test.
So while we're getting set up here, just another quick reminder that you can post your questions in the comments at the bottom of the Redesigning Good post, or you can also tweet your questions with the Redesign Good hashtag. All right, it looks like we're ready. Katrine? Yep.
All good? All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Katrine Ofenstein. Thank you for the introduction, Matt. It's been a pleasure working with you so far. I know that service design is very new to the States. I've been working more in Europe with it, and I am very excited about bringing it over. I've been working with large companies like BlackBerry and also Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and it's been an interesting process to get into talking about service design. I'm a service designer at GE right now, like Cody was telling you, and I've been redesigning some of their internal operations. So it can really be used internally and also externally, but I'll get more into how we think about that. I'm really excited to be here today because the groups that I'm mostly passionate about are within the social innovation space. I'm here today to talk about service design, what it is and how it's been useful for the world, and how it can be useful to you. Granted that design is a very popular word these days, I don't want this to be a word talk. The word service is really suggesting us a focus. It's a little bit different than other types of design, but I'll go through 3 companies that have shared this focus. Afterwards, I'll define the focus and what it could mean for you. I really love service success stories, and the modern economy is seeing more of them. 3 of the examples that I'll be going through today are within personal transportation, video consumption, and clothing commerce. I want to start by telling you a story of 2 services that use identical products. One service is losing ground to another service that is thriving. It's the service of car rentals. Car rental services have been around since the beginning of the 20th century. In that sense, people have been designing services for years. But the need for modern customers utilizing these cars have changed. How, when, and why we need them have been evolving based on where we work and how we play and how we build our cities. So owning a car in major metropolitan areas like New York and San Francisco is less critical because we use it infrequently. Therefore, the cost is higher than the benefit. But let's think about car rentals. The cost of renting a car for a day doesn't outweigh the benefit of using it for a few hours. And for the many individuals who need this car for a short period of time, no service exists to meet this need before Zipcar. Zipcar started out as quite a small company. They saw the challenge of a lot of people having to have their own cars. Some people needed more than one car. Some people just needed a bigger car sometimes when they had visitors. Sometimes the car was just parked too far away. So Zipcar's business model was developed around these challenges and changes. They saw a service opportunity. If they placed cars around a city and asked users to sign up for their service and their system, they could have reliable customers that could easily access different types of cars when they needed to. Now, Zipcar has grown to a very large and successful company, and that success is really a result of a phenomenal service. So something we can note is that the product utility is largely the same, but the value of the experience is improved by improving the service. In fact, the founder was recently speaking at the Service Design Network conference in Paris about the relevance of sharing services to the future of business models. And I'm sure you've seen several other services where it's really about sharing rather than owning your own products. And that's what Zipcar really was one of the leading companies for doing. Let's talk about viewing videos. This is another example I found really fascinating. For years, video rental businesses experienced great growth and success with their service of enabling the rental of physical media. Obviously, the growth of high-speed internet and the availability of advanced modern technology came and made these physical parts viewing the videos less relevant. Now, enter Netflix. Netflix is a company that transitioned from sharing videos or sharing DVDs as a core component to sharing videos. I'm sure you all know Netflix. You probably all use it. It's so relevant and it's so easy to use. Now, Blockbuster started suffering when Netflix came into the market with a service that was more convenient for the user. And while Blockbuster's video sharing offered arguably more option, like you could rent video games, they lacked the ability to catch up with Netflix. The end value of their work never changed, but their service evolved to deliver the value even better. The success of this company, and any video sharing company, may have many details, such as how big is the catalog, how good is the quality of the video, how easy is it to set up. But when we think about it in executive terms, it comes down to one core question: how good is the service I'm paying for? For Netflix, it's really about video consumption as an experience is relatively unchanged, but the evolved service of delivery improves the experience. Now, my last example for right now is about clothing commerce. We all need clothes. We see clothes everywhere. Everyone wears it. Everyone has to shop for it. Now, where do you go to shop? Do you have a specific store that you like to go to? Do you shop online? I wanted to tell you about Zappos. You probably all knew it, but it's very much about service. They focused on that. They started as a relatively small company with an idea of how to improve online retail experiences for the user. Zappos wanted to make the decision-making, the processing, and delivery easier for the customer. Zappos is unique in that their customer service is designed to be far superior to any other competitor in the clothing and accessory industry. They incentivize their employees to stay on the phone as long as necessary with their clients. And that's really fascinating for a company like this. They regularly surprise their customers with free gifts, and they rigorously train their employees to be some of the most empathic people in the world. Tony, the founder, is really dedicated to create one of the most astounding company cultures in the world. And many companies are choosing to see this model and replicate that way of thinking about company culture. So again, the clothing is the same, but the purchase process is improved to make the experience of finding clothes more enjoyable. When you consider the successes that I've talked about, you hear about the amazing experiences of their service. It's not so much about their products. So what do all these services have in common? They've made an active decision about changing the experience of how their customers uses the service. So for Zipcar, service makes it easier to find and utilize personal transportation. Netflix service makes it easier to find and consume videos. Zappos service makes it easier and more convenient to purchase clothes. Notice that all these include products, but their magic comes from the service that surrounds the product. So service is the enabler of these great product experiences. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What is service design? I talk about it as the act of designing services, but it's not really new. The act itself is not the new part. Instead, it's a choice about where your business focuses. Service design is being used in many industries and in many different ways. I really like to think about service design as a way of thinking. Thinking of a service performed by people to people. In my work, I focus on what matters to people in their day-to-day life. It's all about people interactions. We're all surrounded by people, and how we interact with them is what makes it meaningful. When the service is designed meaningfully, the process of everyday interactions is made more meaningful. Let me give you the definition that I like to use. Hilary Cutnam is a great designer at Participle in London, one of my favorite places. She defines service design as this. Service design is the activity of planning and organizing people, infrastructure, communication, and material components of a service in order to improve its quality and the interaction between service provider and customers. Okay, that's very long. So let's break that down. You have your customer. They have to interact with some people. They might be people in your store or customer service that they have to interact with. There's an infrastructure. That might be a store again. That might be a way of purchasing. And there's communication and material components. You might have an app. You might be have a manual that they have to read. There might be pictures. All of these are touch points that the user and the customer has to interact with. Now, service innovation uses design to remove pain points from the journey across these touch points. So if we start to talk about these touch points as a journey, we spread it out over the time of the way that the customer actually interact with those touch points. So if you take the journey of your customer goes into your store, they meet someone greeting there. That's the first little man we have here. Then they come to they think about the store, the experience of the infrastructure. That might be a positive interaction. And then they have to read a manual or they have to read the signs of your products. That might be a more negative interaction. But it's still their personal experience of how they interact with these touch points. They end up asking one of your employees about how they could use this product, and that's more a positive interaction. So the journey starts going up again to a positive interaction and personal, positive feeling. And then they find out that you have an app, and they really love that app. That's the little phone right there. They end up purchasing, and they have to go through customer, and they have to go through customer service, and they have to learn how to use it. So that's maybe less negative. But it's all about how you spread out these touch points and how people interact with all these points in time. I'll get more into that. That's what I call a journey map right here. Service design is really a way of focusing on a business challenge or social change opportunity. It's thinking about the service performed by people to people. So let's talk about something that I really love. I really love to travel. It's an experience full of people, products, and services. Now, this is probably what you think about when you think of traveling. You're sitting in the airplane. It takes a long time, but air travel is something that I'm really reliant on because I have my family in Denmark, and I can't get around traveling. It's all right, but let's be honest. It's not the best in the world. It's not the most amazing feeling of sitting in a plane. It's not the most amazing feeling having to use hours and hours in an airport waiting. How do you think of travel experiences? How do they make you feel? I'd like to talk about that. Let's talk about the airport. Think of yourself in an airport. So when I do service research, there's a lot of tools that I use, but I always start by asking 3 questions. What happened before you got to the airport? Think of all the things that you had to do. You had to pack. Did you take a taxi there? What did you do with your dog? Did you forget to lock the house, or did you remember that? Or all of these questions that are going through your head, and you have to go through all the points that you're going through before you actually get to the airport. Then there's the next part that's being in the airport. It's what's happening during the time. What happens when you get to the airport? You might be arriving in a taxi. You start to interact with the screen because you have to log in and you have to check in. You have to find out where to put your bag. Maybe you have a bag, maybe you don't. What happens when you go through security? How is that experience? Do you go shopping in the little shops afterwards? And what happens at the gate? But think about also what happens when you leave the airport. Where are you actually going? Do you start to think about when you're in the air? What happens in the flight? How's everyone treating you? Do you hear the captain's voice? How's the security video? All of these things are something that you always think about when you're in that round, in that journey. But when you come out to the other side, you might not have thought of how you're actually always constantly thinking about before, during, and after. This is a part of service design. There are these 3 points: before, during, and after. It's really the way it defines your journey. What you see here is the way that I think about it. I always think about the positive interactions that you had and the negative interactions that you had. I like to think about it as the negative are more the improvement points rather than the negative. It's always a way of finding out what you could improve and what you could make better and how to strengthen those positive points. Now, everything is really a system of services, especially in an airport and especially with this type of service, because it's different companies that are involved. You have to interact with different stakeholders. They're not all the same, and they don't always work under the same rules, but it's all a system that makes it better for you. So I like to think about it as the signature moment that is in the blue area. It's often a result of multiple services working together in harmony. That's when your journey has been easy and nice and mellow. And the pain points can happen when many individual services are not working together. So it's really all a journey, going from before to during to after. And this can happen this is what people are going through for any service. Now, service design is about user insights and understanding what is hidden behind the scene. It's all about how people are thinking about all these questions that I just walked you through. If we think about Hillary Putnam's definition of service design, these are all the points again. It's about people, it's about infrastructure, it's about products, and it's about messaging. When these all come together, they create a system of services, a service system. And these are all related. It's something you have to think about when you think about the service, because you can't just think about the people or you can't just think about the product. It's all intertwined, and it's all about what makes it a good experience for the user. Now, let me give you some more tactical ways of expressing and working. I'll tell you a little bit about how I apply this to my work. I use personas. I like to use 3 personas. There are 2 ways of using journey maps, and there are 3 critical service questions. And that all relates into one $10 innovation center. Let me walk you through this. A persona is a fictional character that embodies the key behaviors, attributes, motivations, and goals of a group of real people. So it's really about the research that you've already done, and you can create that into one persona. So it's one fictive character. And this allows you and your colleagues to create a connection to your users. I'll show you some examples of some personas. You don't have to read through all this. It's a persona that Liv worked in. It's about Simon's journey. They like to describe it as a personal character. It's a person that someone has to relate to. Simon is a traveler, and he has some very specific characteristics, and that's what's right here. So it's a way of connecting with Simon. This is another example. This is the one that I did for BlackBerry. It was about an expatriate family, so I couldn't see a persona as one person. I had to see it as a family unit, because that's what's important for this service. And I like to describe through visuals, so I like to use pictures and also words that I connect to the family's values, and in that way tell a part of the story. This is an example of what User Insights did. This is Tina, and she has a lot of characteristics here. You can see that she's a science teacher, you can see her education, but you can also see a little bit about what kind of user type she is and what kind of values she has. So this is really to show that there's many ways of making personas, but it's all about relating to your users. Now let's talk about what journey maps are. A journey map visually and illustrates a particular persona's activities over time. It allows you and your colleagues to consider the use of your service before, during, and after, just like we talked about before. And again, there are many different ways of showing this. Let me go through some examples. This is for TurboTax. They did a study of their users, and they asked users to rate the different times of the journey. And they plotted that into one journey to show all the positives and the negatives and figure out how to actually work with the negatives. This is the one that I did for BlackBerry. The journey, again, for the expatriates was divided into 3 parts: predestination, departure, and on assignment. The little men that you see here in different colors really show how the different stakeholders were involved in the journey. So all these colors are showing different stakeholders that they had to engage with over time. This one is for Lego. It's a future scenario where they're talking about how people should go through the journey of coming to Legoland. It's going through positives and negatives, maybe less negative because they're talking about the future, but again, it's going through before, during, and after. All is to say that there's many ways of doing it, but it all comes down to the fact that you can consider the user's feelings before, during, and after. Now, there are 2 types of journey maps, like you see here, that I like to think about, and I think it's important for you to consider it at the same time and do both. So it's about today's journey. It's a way of reflecting about what's happening today and what's actually the state of the service that you're doing and that you're performing. And then there's tomorrow's journey map. It's all about what is the future? What could you aim towards? What is the ideal journey? And when you compare those 2, you can start to see ways of understanding where your product is doing it right and where you're maybe doing it wrong and want to aim towards another type of future. Now, there are 3 critical service questions that I like to ask businesses. The first one is, why would your customers choose you? The second is, why isn't your service #1 in your market? And the third is, what are the mistakes that your competitors are making that you can solve better? I'll come back to these because I'd like to talk about a $10 innovation center. It can really happen in your office, can happen anywhere. It's something that I would encourage any business to do because it's a way to work together with all of your stakeholders and all of your people. Your employees are as much a part of this journey as much as part of what service you create. So let them be involved and let them come up with solutions with you. Now let's take the personas and pair them with this question that I stated as the first one. So the personas go together with, why would your customers choose you? The second is the today's journey that is paired with the second question, why isn't your service #1 in your market? And today's journey is paired with the third question, why are the mistakes that your competitors are making? What are the mistakes that your competitors are making that you can solve better? So once you start seeing these and comparing these, you can really work and you can find out, you can solve these questions, you can figure out the answers. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But get this up on the wall and start talking about it. Start having ideas, put a canvas to this on the side and have several ideas. It's a way of always evolving this. I really encourage businesses to do this and look at it every 14 days. Come back to it. Always review it. It's not something you do once and then just leave. It's always something you have to review and go through. One of my favorite parts of this job is facilitation. I don't think service designers are a special breed of people. I don't even think designers are a special breed. I think designers are people who want to facilitate positive change for businesses, people, and societies. So in the process of creating these three things that we just talked about before, please feel free to reach out to me or Matthew. We're both facilitators. That's what we do in this business. We like to help. And at the end of my career, the most I can possibly accomplish is the facilitation of change for people. It's not a tool or a portfolio. It's having helped people accomplish the experiences they envision, which is why I'm willingly sharing these tools with you today. It's not the tools or the maps that are important. Honestly, it's not even the service that's important. It's that this process makes things better for all people involved that's important. That is design. That's the value. And that's why I'm willingly and lovingly wanting to do this for the rest of my life. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Cody, should we jump into some questions now, or would it be better if we chatted a little bit more?
Let's chat a little bit more. We don't have many questions in yet, so just a reminder to anyone watching: if you have any questions about how some of these principles can apply to your organization, you can post them in the comments on the Redesigning Good post, or you can also post them on Twitter using the hashtag RedesignGood.
Yeah, I had a few thoughts that I'd be happy to share. I know it's a lot of information to take in, and I think Katrine went really deep with a lot of these insights. So probably, I'm guessing a lot of people are trying to absorb it all. But what is usually useful for me is to kind of look at how I've used these principles in practical examples. So just in my own life and work, one example we talked about in the article was doing this kind of customer journey map that Katrine talked about. So we have a conference room where we've got basically like 3 open walls, and we just covered all those walls with Post-it notes. And we looked at everything from the very first time that someone would likely hear about our organization all the way to once we've completed a project with them and done all the follow-up and everything that we want to do after the project's completed. And we probably had hundreds of Post-it notes up on these 3 walls talking about each of these touch points. And I think one point Katrine made is that sometimes these things involve a product. When you're looking at Zipcar, you have a car, it's the same car, but it's really that service experience that's built around it. So I think when you take every single touch point like this and you really examine it, then you start to get all these insights where you say, you know what, we think this is really clear, but imagine being in the shoes, and I think design is ultimately always about empathy and putting yourself in other people's shoes. So imagine ourselves in the shoes of our customer trying to find out information about us, or in the case of something like Zipcar, trying to rent this car. Where are they going to go for that information? How are they going to find it? Is that going to be easy for them or difficult for them? And you see this a lot when you do things like user testing with websites, where you create something that you think is crystal clear. Oh, you're this audience, you would just click on this button and it would take you right here, simple. Then you get 10 people in the office and you have them do some user testing, and 9 out of 10 can't find the thing that you thought was unbelievably obvious. So I think these processes are super helpful to sort of get us out of the shoes of the inside, the company, the people who've created this stuff, who may have a lot of background knowledge around things, and realize that somebody else probably has a lot less time to figure things out. It's probably in the context of a lot going on around them, and so how do you make that process great for them? And a couple examples I was just jotting down as she was talking. One that I really love is Airbnb. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that. We just recently got a spot for a retreat that we're doing this summer for our company, and it was so nice to hop on Airbnb and look at these potential places that we could rent out for our retreat. And we actually, just for variety's sake, hopped on a couple other services that also allow people to rent out their homes for things like this. And just the process, I mean, the same homes are often listed on both of these sites, but it's night and day. And you don't even want to be on these other sites because it's so difficult to search by the kind of things that you're looking for and to figure out that you wind up just getting frustrated and leaving. When you were talking about the airlines, Katrine, I thought a lot about Virgin America, which is my favorite airline to fly. And you get on some airlines, and I'm sure everyone's had this experience where you feel like, wow, this process of going through the airport hasn't changed much in 30 years, and even the design of the airplanes hasn't changed much, except for the fact that there's more security now. So in some ways, it's kind of gotten worse. And they're really a company that's looked at that and has tried to create, a more interesting and better experience for people. And sometimes that's done in really expensive ways that would be hard for someone to replicate, but sometimes there's just small things that you can do. And I think that's what's so cool about going through this process is you often identify quick fixes that really aren't even that expensive, but maybe nobody just put their attention on what the experience is really like for the end user, and you can create really wonderful things.
I also wanted to add to what you were saying, Matt, is that you were talking about having so many Post-it notes, and that's very often because you have so many stakeholders. One thing you can do to start off is to just use one of your personas and walk them through the journey, and then choose the other persona and walk them through the journey. And you might start seeing some differences and some ways that you want to figure out how people are actually using it differently. Because with Airbnb, there are different ways to use it, and they're with different people that want to use it for different reasons. So it's really interesting tools to utilize all the time.
Yeah, one thing we shared when Katrina gave this presentation at our Design It event was the first Design It event that we put on, we really had no idea how the whole thing would go. So we created a map, and then we created different people. We had our speakers, and we had our designers, and we had our organizations, and we walked each of them. We had a little time scale that went by, and we say, okay, it's 8:30, 30 minutes before the event starts. Where is everybody? Where are our volunteers? Where are these people? Who's going to get in touch with them? And you find these points. Oh, at 10:30, we're transitioning from this event to this event, and we just kind of have that written in the schedule like it's going to flow. But if you're a speaker, are you going to know that you have to go from this area to that area? No one's told them that. Maybe we should tell them that, or maybe there needs to be a sign. So you really, like Katrina is saying, you sort of walk through by persona type, and you really get a deep understanding of what people are going to need.
So I think one question, so we have one question now, but to hold it off, because such a large part of our audience here at the Chronicle are fundraisers especially, and this is one thing that every nonprofit really is concerned about is fundraising. So Katrina, I don't know if you want to talk, maybe let's think about an online donation form, kind of how this process would be applied to kind of thinking about those personas and kind of those experiences.
Sure, yeah. I think one of the things to figure out is who is the main target group that you're looking at. So start to think about who you're approaching and who is the main fundraiser that you're actually looking for. Is there specifics there, or is it a general group? And if there are specifics, show those in the persona, so it's not just one general persona. And then start to walk through some of the questions that the audience might be looking at and that they might be wanting to know. And yeah, I think it's always about thinking through all the questions that would be a way to see the whole flow. Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add for this one.
No, I think that's good from a general point of view. I mean, I think, so much of what's cool about service design is, again, moving away from it just being about the product. So if we're talking specifically about like an online donation, there's a lot of interesting questions there for an interaction designer to answer. And then I think it's sort of taking a step back from that, which is what I think is so cool about this, and saying, okay, how would someone get to that site? How would they know about that? How do they know about the organization? What's the process after they fill out the form? I mean, I know a lot of people who are involved in fundraising must have the experience that people have gone back later and said, hey, after I gave my money, I didn't feel like anyone had really been in touch with me. And it's hard. You're busy. You've got a lot of people to manage. So I think anytime you can sort of map out and apply this sort of empathetic filter to what an individual experiences. How do I find out about nonprofit X? And then, okay, I was convinced to give money, that the website was built great. I gave them money. It was easy to do. Then afterwards, did someone get in touch with me? What opportunities were created for me to be more engaged? Did it feel like I was just being pulled in because they wanted more money from me? Or did I feel like I was really being drawn in to participate because I cared about this cause? And so it starts to build a framework around a specific product or interaction that you might have in a physical or digital space, and make it a much broader context.
So we can take our first question now. This comes from Zach. So since these systems, kind of the systems we're looking at, often involve a lot of infrastructure and money, what are the tools that you can use to prototype ideas to test viability, just to kind of, mitigate any kind of risk there? Katrine, you want to take that first?
I think I'm going to let Matt go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think back to like the example that I gave for what we did at our company. It wasn't an expensive process at all. We basically just got everyone in the company to sit in a conference room, and every person played a slightly different role. And you actually learn a lot about how each person sees the world through their filter. So the designers at our company might see it a little bit differently than the business development people, who might see it differently than the project manager. And they all are hearing different kinds of feedback from clients, and they're all experiencing different points of friction, both with the outside world and within the company. So you might find that somebody in your development department is experiencing they're getting certain kind of feedback from donors that is not being given to someone in operations that might be valuable information. So you start to see all these different interaction points between everyone in an organization, and you can just kind of lay that out. And for us, that was a matter of maybe like 1 to 2 hour meetings, and the cost of like 200 Post-it notes, whatever that is, like $1 or $2. So it was really much more an investment in our time than anything else, but it wasn't a huge one. And what I like to do with design, like in habits in life in general, I think, is it's just better to take a slice of something and just try it and see where you can get. So if you have a big, complicated organization and it would be really hard to get everybody in a room and map something out, try it with just your department, or even with just you and a couple of your coworkers. You could figure out how to improve just what a few of you are doing. And that for sure is going to reap benefits. And once you really get good at figuring out how to draw the practical benefits out of that process, you can then expand it to your whole department. And then once that department is experiencing all these gains, then you can bring it out to the larger organization. So I think there are some actually pretty inexpensive tools to do good things with this. And I think when even those tools seem time-consuming and expensive, start small and then build up from there. And I don't know, handing it back off to Katrine, one thing that I know people often wonder about are other resources. So if this is all a lot for people to absorb, maybe kind of tying in this idea of how to do things inexpensively with great books or websites or other resources that you could give to people.
Mm-hmm. I want to first tie another tip into what Matt was saying, because it's really about starting with maybe 1 or 2 personas and audiences with your organization, and walking them through the process, or even just a little part of the process. But then something that you can do to not just start from scratch is to have other audiences look at that journey that you just did and sort of show where there are some challenges in that journey that you might not have thought of, or that audience group might not have thought of. And in that way, you can make it even more clear. Some of the good books that you can look at is This is Service Design Thinking. And there's also the website for the Service Design Network that I'm a part of. Not to promote that, it's not so much about that, but the Service Design Network is a large organization of service designers, and we are all collecting tools and methods for how to do this type of work. It is, of course, related to user experience. There's a lot to get there. I think that for me, it's not so much about calling it service design. It's really more about the focus, like I was talking about in my presentation. It's more about people-to-people interactions and how we can think about that. But those 2 resources are definitely somewhere to pull.
Yeah, and I think also, just to add to that, some of the organizations that are kind of on the cutting edge of this, it would be great if we had like 100 really solid examples of how this is being applied to nonprofits, but then we would have to wait a long time, and we wouldn't be able to give this knowledge to people right now. So sort of had to make that trade-off. But I think you can look at places like Frog Design and IDEO and Adaptive Path, and Katrine probably maybe has some others, but those are great organizations that I know she and I are both really familiar with, and that I think do really fantastic work. and you can look at the kinds of things they're doing, and they have started to apply this to a lot of nonprofits and NGOs and other kind of work like that. I know I was at an Adaptive Path conference where they were doing something really cool with the United Nations, and they were trying to figure out, as crises were developing around the world, how could they use the interactions between people to sort of identify these processes early on and start to bring in the necessary resources much earlier in the process and mitigate some of the effects, and even some prevention could happen through that. So I mean, I think you just want to sort of get what the idea is and some of the tools for how to use it. And if that's clear, I think it could be applied in so many ways. And obviously, because so many nonprofits are service focused, you're really trying to, and not just the constituents that you're bringing, that maybe the main focus of the charity, but also the donors and all the other people around. There is such a human component to how they're interacting with these organizations that really, again, creating some good personas and through an empathy filter, really thinking about what is it like for this person to go through this process and mapping out the best that you can. It's better to just get started, I would say, even if you don't have perfect information. And just based on what you and your colleagues know, walk people through this journey and figure out where they might be having some problems and just make the easiest fixes. And I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, the best way is really to just imagine you're in their shoes, having that empathy, as Matt is saying, like starting before getting engaged with your service, and just take it a little bit of a step at a time. I wanted to also add a couple more companies that are working on this in this field in London. One is LiveWork, that I gave an example of their persona, and another one is the Design Council. It's a really interesting organization in London. That's the London Design Council that's really working for public sector work. And they are doing a lot of service design and are really important to look into. There's also Participle, like Hillary Cutnam, that was giving the definition from. And there's a lot of great work coming out of London for public sector work if you're in that field.
We have another question posted in the comments here. So, do you have any insights or suggestions for organizations trying to facilitate a non-monetary experience, such as signing a petition or sharing pro-social content on social media? What are the typical negative experiences you have seen along that journey? So maybe just kind of brainstorming to help out here, some negative experiences that we might see, maybe some personas they should look at for this.
I think there are definitely challenges with service design and getting into that mindset, but it's really because people see it as a very complex tool. I think, as Matt was saying really rightly, just break it down into the questions and into walking it through very slowly. It's not about wanting to do everything at once. That's where you can get lost. And just take it a little bit a step at a time and focus on different areas and you might have one product that you focus it on, or one type of user that you start focusing it on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to have all the answers for every specific situation without digging into it, but I think hopefully the sort of broad principles work well. So again, if you can just kind of, one thing you could do if you say, okay, I'm not really sure like what are the pain points in this process? I'm not super familiar with it. We sat around and brainstormed and we weren't really sure, or we all disagreed. You can just get someone to sort of walk through the process, or sit with someone who has walked through the process and talk to them. And for sure, they're going to have some really interesting things to say. I mean, again, a parallel process I see a lot is when you user test with websites, and you just see people, it's very obvious where some of the pain points are and where things need to be fixed. And I think also there's probably going to be a lot of collaboration between other types of designers and service designers, right, Katrina? Like, a lot of solutions these days are going to have an online component to it. So you're probably working a lot with interaction designers, user experience designers, and visual designers, and in crafting a solution for someone. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. The service component of it is really the overarching strategy, And then you start, when you look into the touch points, that's when a lot of the other designers are also even more their core competency. So it's really a collaboration of user research and also interaction design and user experience. So yeah, I think you're very right about user research. That's a way to tap into your users' knowledge. Like, go out and ask them. Like, you don't have to know everything yourself, but if you can go out and talk with your users, that's when you start to figure out some of the pain points. And even sit with them together and look at the website that you have. Look at some of the ways that they interact with it. And it's not so much about user testing. It's really more to see how are they interacting with it. Can they on a Google search find it, or how would they even find it? So yeah, I think user research is a very important component to definitely think about.
Yeah, and just one final note on that. I think people get intimidated sometimes by things like user research because they know there's really large market research firms out there that get paid millions of dollars to do this kind of thing. And there certainly are applications where that level of sophistication is needed and really great. But I think not to get intimidated by that, like even just grabbing a random person off the street and putting them through a process, you're going to get 50, 60, 70% of the way there just on that. And if you need to sort of tweak at the margins and you're in a kind of business where down the road you want to really specialize that, then that's great. You can go find someone out there who's an expert in the field. But a lot of the low-hanging fruit can be solved just by getting any person through a process.
Yeah, and that's sometimes also where some of the interesting critique points can be found, because they might not know anything about your industry, and that's when you can figure out how is it actually found, because some people in your industry might just know because they've been there for so long.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question before some final thoughts. So the question is, how does a person who may not have much decision-making power make the case that service design is important and needed? Does this go back to your point, Matt, earlier, to just start small?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I know that definitely happens. This came up a lot when I used to study business about like culture, things like that, where some people would take a class on organizational behavior and say the same thing. This all sounds really fantastic. I love the example of how the top people at Southwest Airlines overhauled their culture, but if I show up at work and I'm 5 people below the CEO and I have this idea about how we need to shift the whole company culture, who's going to listen to me? Or even if they listen to me, how can I get the budget for this kind of thing? So yeah, to your point, Cody, I think that's really it. Try to paint the picture for people who you think can really benefit from something like this. But if they're not sure about it, they don't understand enough, or they're skeptical, or whatever the obstacle may be, start small. Like I said, you can do things in a few hours for a few dollars with just you and a couple of your coworkers. And if you can go back and you can say, just by having this 2-hour process, we were able to improve these interactions with our donors, with our clients, with whoever it is, substantially, and here's how we did it. Don't you think it would be a good idea to extend that on to like our department? You'll have a compelling case, and I think in a lot of cases some people will say, yeah, let's try it out. Let's see if we can, again, do something a little bit larger and see if the benefits still continue. And if it does, then hopefully it keeps growing from there.
I think my tip would be to draw out the journey, just to add on Matt's point, draw out the journey on a wall where everyone can see it and everyone pretty much walks by it. And pull your colleagues in, like one by one, and ask them to show you their way of seeing that journey. And they might be starting to think about the way that you're seeing it and the way that you're talking about before, during, and after. And then you can start to show them where some positives are and some negatives. And in that way, it's really about showing them the process rather than talking to them about the process. So I think that's the way to start, where you can gradually introduce this type of thinking.
Yeah, I think those kind of physical artifacts are always so nice, whether it's Post-its on a wall or a map that you can put up there and people can interact with. Conversations just begin to happen around those things it's not going to happen if it's sitting in a Google Doc on your computer. So that's always great. We can get people up off their computers and talking to each other around something central that they can all kind of focus on. And yeah, it's really great.
right, so we're just about out of time. Any final thoughts or final advice? Start with you, Katrina.
I think we've sort of gone over. It's really about it's not so much about the term. It's really about the thinking, the way of approaching it, the way of starting from the small. So I think that's what I'll leave you with. Start with the small.
Yep. I will just echo that. I think just whatever, I think there's opportunities for every organization to constantly improve how they're interacting with all the people they're trying to serve. And I think this is especially true with a lot of nonprofits. So just finding a bite-sized chunk that you can start with. And then I think it's an amazing way to feel more connected to all the different kinds of people in your organization, from your coworkers to the people that you serve, to your donors, to your board, whatever it is. And once you sort of find some ways to improve that, just keep going and keep finding new parts of the organization in the process that can be improved.
Great. So I think that's about all the time we have. So thanks to our panelists today for joining us. It's been a great hour. And thanks for everyone who watched for tuning in. We will have this recording available as soon as this ends. If you enjoyed today's talk, please be sure to check out Matthew's Redesigning Good blog on philanthropy.com. And we also offer other online learning opportunities at philanthropy.com. For our weekly live chats, visit philanthropy.com/live. And for our webinar series, please visit philanthropy.com/webinars. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.